Well, welcome everyone. We are talking to the Democratic candidates for Legislative District 11. A couple of weeks ago, we talked to their Republican counterparts who are all incumbents. I will go ahead and go through and have everybody introduce themselves and give a little background and introduce yourself to our Maricopa audience.
Is there some order you'd like us to go into?
Whoever wants to talk first.
Okay. My name is Linda Patterson, and I'm excited to be running for state senate in this district. I think that there's a lot of things that need to change. The Republicans have had their way for a long time, and I think for most of us Democrats, we feel that they've kind of messed things up. And so I look forward to representing you in the state senate should you decide to vote for me. I have been working with people all of my life. I was a high school teacher, a high school counselor, and a high school principal for 36 years. And during that time, I worked with all kinds of people, diverse needs, diverse backgrounds. The diversity was something that really engaged me. I was awarded Teacher of the Year, Staff Member of the Year for being a really adept school counselor, and Administrator of the Year for being a principal. And then my career culminated by me being selected by Stanford University to work in part of their academies to reform high schools. So one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing is looking at systems and looking at things that need to be changed and trying to truly instituting transformational change. That's not just tinkering on the edges of things, but really going after exactly what it is that needs to be changed. And so I pride myself on that. And I look to do that in education in our state, in healthcare. We need to reinvent our economy. It's an old economy that is not serving people. We need to get more jobs, more middle-class jobs, and I'm excited about looking at that. I've got some concrete plans to do that. We have to look at our water and climate crisis because we are in a big crisis in those areas too. And finally, the Black Lives Matter has shown us that we've got a real human rights struggle that we've got to tend to. You know, I think it's time for us to stand up, to pay attention, and to work toward true equality and justice in our state. I know when I first moved here 12 years ago, I was pretty well astounded by the lack of progress that this state has had in the area of Indigenous peoples' rights, Latinos' rights, Black Lives Matter rights, you know, any minority or marginalized group of people, certainly we need to stand up for at this time. My heart is filled with hope for our future. In fact, our campaign slogan is focused on the future. And so I look forward to talking to you about some of the things that I'm really invested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And where do you live?
I live in Oro Valley.
Your opponent in this race for Senate, Joanna, can you give us your background and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, absolutely. So my name is Joanna Mendoza. I'm a Democrat running for Arizona State Senate in Legislative District 11. And, you know, I consider myself a small town kid born and raised right here in our rural communities in Pinal County. You know, I'm the daughter of farm workers, worked alongside my parents in the cotton fields many a summer in the hot Arizona sun. And despite how hard my parents worked, they still had a difficult time making ends meet. And we often found ourselves on government assistance programs like food stamps, Section 8 housing access. And I was usually the kid on free lunch at school. And I make it a point to mention that because, you know, my story is not unique to just me. It's the story of many working families still struggling and living in the district today. I had the honor and privilege of serving my country in military uniform in 2 branches of service, the United States Navy for 1 enlistment and the United States Marine Corps for a little over 17 years and retired a couple of years ago. I've been forward deployed to Iraq twice, once to Afghanistan. I've led Marines in a variety of different environments and situations to include forward deployed to a combat environment. And I made my way back home with my son after retiring and wanted to put down roots back in our communities. And, I remember coming back and thinking, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to see so much change and growth and development, and being just heartbroken and very disappointed at what I saw. And it was really eye-opening for me when I ended up taking a position, working for a member of Congress here in Arizona's 1st Congressional District. And we had folks coming to us for just a variety of different issues, because, folks are naturally going to go where they can find assistance. And just realizing and how eye-opening it was to see that so many folks were struggling. And so I had the opportunity to really understand the knowledge, or gain the knowledge and understanding of the issues that were not only impacting our district, but Arizona as a whole. Issues like funding, fully funding public education. I serve as a school board member here in our small rural community in Red Rock, where I live, and just our schools were falling apart, and realizing that it just wasn't our school in this small rural community, but it was schools throughout Arizona who weren't being funded well. And additionally, coming across folks who had to drive 50 to 100 miles to get access to healthcare. A lot of folks in District 11 don't have transportation, or they're senior and have a really difficult time trying to get to appointments, in Southern Arizona and Tucson, or maybe up north in Phoenix, because we just don't have the healthcare professionals in our district to address their needs. Being just shocked at, the lack of progress that we've made for climate change and water preservation. And really, for myself as a veteran, serving a military uniform for 20 plus years, sacrificing, being forward deployed, being away from family, and coming back home, I thought that I would find a job very easily, and still struggling to find employment. So military service members and veterans are also a priority for me. And of course, I mentioned the issues that I want to champion, which is fully funding public education, making sure that every kid has the ability to access quality education regardless of zip code, ensuring that folks have access to affordable health care, ensuring that we're addressing climate change and water shortage, and also taking care of our military service members and veterans. I fought my way out of poverty. I fought to protect our constitutional rights as a United States Marine, and I will fight for the people in this district when elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Dr. Perez, you're running for House. Could you tell us about yourself?
Sure, thank you, Raquel. My name is Dr. Felipe Perez, and I'm running for Arizona State House of Representatives in District 11. I grew up and I went to school in Arizona, and now I'm raising my family here. I currently serve as a family medicine physician in Tucson, and I'm also the director for a family medicine residency program in Southern Arizona. Every day, I see the deficiencies in our healthcare system and how that negatively impacts so many patients. We need to increase coverage for everyone by making healthcare affordable and accessible. In addition, if you already have good medical insurance, you need to be guaranteed that you will have access to care when you need it. We need to invest in the well-being of our state. I'm running for office because we need new leadership that understands the healthcare needs of Arizona. As an experienced physician and somebody who grew up in Arizona, I will bring my expertise to create real solutions for our everyday problems. For all these reasons, I'm asking for people's vote, and your vote is for an experienced, independently minded physician that will work across party lines and fight for a strong Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've already have questions coming in from viewers. One is from Anna Clark for everyone. They go right to it. Do you support defunding the police? Let's start with Dr. Perez.
Sure, I'm sorry, Raquel, can you repeat that question again?
Do you support defunding the police?
So, I'll say law enforcement is an agency that protects the public. And I really am disappointed that this has become a political issue. I think we have had the same type of law enforcement since its inception. We need to look at law enforcement reform. I think we need to look at how we have the system now. I think Our men and women in uniform need more than what they have now. We need to add social workers, case managers, behavioral health specialists to their tool belt so they can reach for that when they need it. It is absolutely critical that we add these additional services so that they can really be able to serve the community and protect our community, the public.
Joanna Mendoza.
Yeah, police reform is one aspect of the systemic racism that we have seen in our nation for a very long time. And what we've seen is that this is something that's not going to be fixed overnight. This is something that's going to take a very long time to be fixed. And I'm talking about systemic racism. When we're talking about police reform, we need to ensure that there's accountability and transparency for those who have taken an oath to protect and serve our communities. And there have been proposals such as wearing body cams, ensuring that there is a database for officer misconduct, that we take a look at how police departments are actually spending the money that is allocated to them. Do police departments need to have access to military equipment and weapons that are used in war? And, that is a question that needs to be asked and answered. I think that we need to reallocate funding for programs, for social service programs, mental health programs that would allow police officers to address some of these calls that they get tasked to go on. And right now, it just seems like there's not the training, and they have been militarized because a lot of them are spending funding on buying equipment that is used in war. And honestly, if our police officers are taking an oath to protect and serve our communities, then why are we having access to equipment that is used in the military to go to war to Iraq and Afghanistan? So my answer to that question is that we need to take a look at everything as a whole, and reallocate funding where necessary to ensure that police officers have the resources and tools to be able to execute their jobs responsibly and safely.
Linda Patterson.
Thank you. I think if you have 100 people in a room and you ask them if they want to defund the police, you'll get 100 different answers. And so that's the first thing I'd like to stress, is that we have to come at this from a general understanding of what we're talking about. I think it's real important right now that we look at economic, social, and political justice. And when we look at law and order issues, we need to really be able to define very specifically what we're talking about. Militarization of the police began when George Bush was in office. And it was all about, hey, we have all these war machines, so we're going to just bring those in and have you work off of that. Well, that's not something that works well for a lot of people. I think it's really important that we're careful in defining what the issue is and coming up with some really good solutions to that. And I don't think we've done it so much at this point. I think that there's a lot of people who are looking at what's going on with economic, social, and political justice, and they're saying, defunding the police doesn't make sense. Militarizing the police doesn't make sense. We've got to look at what we're all talking about. And I think right now what people are coming to is we need community-based decisions in order to truly come to terms with what we're going to do about some of these problems.
Okay. And we'll get into COVID. That's the reason why we're working this way right now today, is because of the outbreak. What is your opinion of how the state's response to COVID-19 in general? Was it appropriate, or did it go overboard, or not enough?
I'll speak to that so we don't waste time.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm concerned about the COVID crisis is it was totally mismanaged. Our governor did not step up, and still really has not stepped up in the way that other states' governors have in order for us to really deal with this COVID crisis. And so what's happened is we get worse and worse every day. We're now to the point where hospitals are having to look at public facilities in order to put people into treatment. If we look at preventive tactics, there's not a lot happening. Nobody's taken a strong stand against masks in time that it should have done. And even the treatment, there's a lot that we were behind in the beginning of the COVID crisis. I know when I got COVID in March, the only thing that was happening in the state at that time was they were telling us to wash our hands with hand sanitizer. But when it came to getting a test or anything like that, it was difficult to do. And even now people are getting tested, and some get their results right away. Some it takes 2 days, some it takes a week or 2 weeks. This just can't happen when you're in the middle of a pandemic. So right now, I believe that there's been a real failure on the part of our leaders. I'm really, really impressed with what the Arizona Democrats have come up with for a COVID response. And I just wish that the minds in leadership would listen to what the research, the best practice, and the data is showing us about the COVID crisis. We can do better.
Dr. Perez.
Sure. As a medical doctor in the front lines, I can attest that Arizona was not well prepared to control the spread of COVID-19. I think the fail of our government was multifactorial, and it could have been prevented. Reason number one is they underestimated COVID-19 from the beginning, despite witnessing the devastation that had happened in Italy and like states in New York. The second thing was Arizona, as Linda mentioned, was not prepared to conduct the testing that we needed. In addition, we are not prepared to process specimens, and we still aren't prepared to process those specimens in a timely manner. And why does that matter? I'll give you an example. Today, I called a patient to give her COVID results. They were positive. That test was taken 12 days ago. 12 days ago. It took that long. And despite trying to educate public about staying safe, being quarantined, this patient couldn't stay home. 12 days was just too long for her to stay home. So when she picked up the phone today, she was at work. Imagine the number of more cases we're gonna have because other people got exposed, when this could have been easily prevented by having faster results. I think also the saddest part of this pandemic is the mixed messages from our governor and state representatives. During this crisis, we have state representatives that claim the impact of COVID-19 is not real. I believe this is misleading people, causing them to not take the proper precautions. As a physician, I know this is having a real impact. I see it every day, how it hurts people. I've seen fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, children, co-workers, neighbors that have passed away. And I have my deepest condolences for these people who have lost loved ones. And if you elect me, I will make sure that next time something like this happens, Arizona is well prepared.
Well, Joanna, what do you think the governor should have done?
Yeah, you know, we either saw no response or a slow response to COVID. You know, leaders right now, the governor, the state legislature, they have a responsibility to ensure that they keep the public safe, that they do their jobs to make sure that they're passing legislation that would improve people's lives. And I wish I could sit here and say that this is all the governor's fault, but I don't believe so. I think that if you're an elected official during these very difficult times, during this pandemic, you have a responsibility to your constituents and to find out what is going on in our communities. And we haven't seen that leadership. We haven't seen leadership step up in this district. You know, when I was forward deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, I had to make tough decisions. I had a company of Marines that I was responsible for, and I had to balance the mission for success while also ensuring that I kept my Marines safe. And I could not guarantee that we were going to come back with everyone, even though I knew deep down inside it was my responsibility to make sure that I did. But what I did do was I prepared them with information so that they knew what they were up against. I gave them guidance on how to protect themselves and how to mitigate the risk. And I also ensured that I created an environment that was centered around unity and teamwork, because we weren't going to get through this by ourselves. And that's what I'd like to see our elected officials do. The state senator, Mr. Leach and Fincham and Roberts should have been in the communities talking to their local elected officials, to municipalities, city councils, to figure out what the needs are in the community. That's what I would have done. I would have gotten on a call or a Zoom call, and I would have said, hey, what's going on in your communities? I would have gathered the information throughout the district. Then I would have analyzed that information for trends to see what the trends were throughout the district. I would have then reached out to my colleagues at the state legislature to see what trends or what things they were seeing in their communities. And I would have built a coalition to take to the governor and say, hey, these are the trends that we're seeing in our communities. These are the things that we need to implement. These are what the professionals are saying, to do that advocacy and be that voice. And right now we have that leadership that's missing here in the district. So again, I wish I could say that the governor's fully responsible, even though he has that authority, but there's more that our elected officials can be and should be doing, and they're not.
Do you feel like they have been, your opponents and the governor have been advocating strongly for businesses? They're very concerned about them having to be closed for so long, those that were not essential. What would be your approach to something like that, to balance the safety and health with people that have to survive? They need a paycheck. What would you do, Linda?
Well, I think that this is where transformational change comes in. We have to transform what's going on. We can't do business like we have in the past. I'm aware of some businesses, the restaurant business, for example, and the bar business, who appear to be, really concerned about this. And what they're doing in some states is they're moving outside where they can social distance people and they can still serve the public. I think that's one solution that could have promise. Now, a lot of people say it's too hot in Arizona. Well, misters are available. I go to a restaurant right now with, not a restaurant, but a take home that has misters, and it really does work. I think there are, the same could happen in a lot of different industries. It's just thinking out of the box. And that's something I've done all my life. And I'm proud to be able to think out of the box to represent you in the state legislature.
Dr. Perez, you want to take on that question about balancing public health and the need to have an economy that's thriving?
Absolutely. I think you mentioned that key word is balance. So I think our state representatives' performance during this pandemic has been very poor, sad, and really concerning. Why? Because not only have they done nothing good about it, they have hindered safeguards to slow down the transmission of the virus. Even worse, the incumbents have intentionally lied to people and now claiming that Governor Ducey is misleading the public about the data just to justify his decisions for safety. The representatives right now are dishonoring, dangerous, and just divisive for Arizona. It is time to consider replacements. I think if we would have slowed down the virus, we could have really kept more businesses open, but that didn't happen because nobody was taking precautions to help slow down the spread of the virus. If I am elected, I will be honest, transparent about the virus, how it spreads, how it kills, and more importantly, I will make sure that the public gets the right education and message so we can all be united and beat this disease together and get our economy back on track.
Now, all through the pandemic, numbers have changed in our understanding of what's going on there. Even Dr. Fauci would say that his information changed almost on a daily basis. And so you kind of understand where legislators would be coming from in interpreting or analyzing the numbers that they're being given on a daily basis. Shouldn't that play into our understanding of why they act the way they do?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: this is what happens when you don't have a coordinated response at the federal level. This is what happens when you don't have a coordinated response at the state level, where you have these different sources of information that are being thrown at folks, and some folks are saying this is a hoax, this is like the chicken pox, this is not true. So what we need to see from leadership is we need to see a unified, coordinated response on how to respond. You asked the question earlier about how would we have balanced the economy with keeping people safe? First and foremost, you do that through leadership. by sharing with the public the information that you have accessible, by being completely honest and transparent, that this is not a hoax, this is not a joke, that people are dying, people are suffering right now, people don't have access to healthcare. And then you say, here's what we're gonna do. There's no guidelines right now across the board on how businesses should open safely. There's recommendations, but there's nothing that says, okay, you have, this is the checklist and this is what you need to do in order to ensure that everyone who comes into your business is safe and to mitigate the risk. Because we know that there's no guarantee to mitigate the risk, but we're not seeing that. So again, you know, the leadership is extremely important, and having a coordinated response is going to ensure that we mitigate that risk. And right now, because we have folks doing different things, it's really putting a lot of people at risk.
Okay.
You know,
We do have a
Raquel,
question. Yes, go ahead.
I see it a little bit differently. And that is, if you look at what the Democratic caucus has done, they have done everything that Joanna just talked about. They have come up with concrete solutions. But what's happening is Ducey doesn't listen to them. And a lot of that is the result of Leach, the person we're running against. He has a hold on a lot of the things. And so, you know, if we want to put blame somewhere, I don't think we can just, you know, blanket the legislature, because the Democrats have come up with solid solutions. It's just that they're not being listened to. And that's how polarized our entire political system has gotten, to where we can't even come together to solve a pandemic. It's really sad. I'll do better.
We're going to switch over to education. We've gotten a few questions coming in from viewers. Do you feel that schools should reopen on August 17th, as the governor has proposed? If no, what guidelines do you believe we should reach before opening those buildings? Let's start with Linda. Let's go ahead.
Okay, definitely not. If I had a child, there's no way I would send him to public school right now. And I think that's what the trend is what's happening. We're listening to the experts finally, rather than just going off of assumptions. And I think that's really, really important. I like what's coming out with some people, that you've got to have a certain rate of COVID crisis before you allow schools to open. I think that's concrete. I think it's research-based and evidence-based. And that's what we need to do in our state, like other states have adopted. I do want kids in school as soon as we can get them in after the pandemic is over, because we all know that public education is a great equalizer and all kids are involved, and we need to get to that. But we can't get to that if we threaten teachers, school staff, and kids.
Dr. Perez.
Yes, you know, and I will clarify, because I know the governor, there was a lot of questions after that conference that he had. So here we're talking about either virtual school opening or on-site opening. As it is right now, it is not safe to open schools on August 17th. I think we do have to look at the numbers. We need to look at, make sure that we're trending down. I think that would be opening schools too quickly, and our numbers were going to start going up very quickly. So I think that, yes, they should open schools on August 17th, but they should start virtually until we learn more about the numbers and we learn more about the virus and what precautions we need to take to make sure that students, parents, the community, and teachers are safe.
Okay, Joanna?
Yeah, Raquel, so this is a very complicated issue, right? And so, I mean, as a school board member in our rural school district here in Red Rock, and as a parent with a school age child, I'm torn. And I see, you know, being on the school board, we have educators, we have staff who are concerned about returning back to school. And as a parent, I understand the struggle of trying to balance work and trying to educate your kid at home. It is difficult, but at the end of the day, we have to follow the data and the science. And that says right now that it's not safe to send our kids back to school. You know, as the school board member, I signed on to that petition, to that letter demanding that Governor Ducey put certain guidelines and measures in place so that school districts can have an opportunity to put those safety measures in place before reopening our schools. You know, additionally, there's limitations of cutting the funding. We don't have the resources. We don't have the funding. All of these issues need to be addressed, in addition to following the science and the data, before we can ensure that our kids go back to school. Because it's not just about the kids, it's about the teachers, it's about the staff. And even if one family is doing everything that they can to try to, mitigate the risk, you can't guarantee that everyone is doing that. So, there have been recommendations about seeing more testing, contact tracing. Dr. Perez talked about how long it's taking for folks to get their test back. If we get a kid that tests positive in school, what are the procedures for that? We're going to shut down the whole school? I mean, there's just so many things to consider. And also, I think lastly, what's really important is that we need to look at each community individually. If we're seeing that the positive rate is going down, that there's the curve is flattening, then maybe those school board members make the decision to reopen that school. So it's not a cookie cutter mold that fits everyone. We just have to do the best that we can, and we have to do it together as a community to ensure we keep as many people as safe as possible.
At the beginning of this, you were talking about fully funded education. This is a question from Anna. I just want to know exactly, what does that mean? What does fully funded education mean?
Yeah, that means actually funding our education system so that we can afford to school infrastructure. Our schools are falling apart. We can ensure that we're paying our teachers the salaries that they deserve, that we have the resources in our schools to ensure that our kids are getting a quality education. I think that the pandemic has really highlighted how poorly funded our schools have been for such a long time. If we're talking about going virtual, we have schools in our school district right now in District 11 who will not be able to do that because they don't have rural broadband in their area, in their communities, or they don't have enough laptops or iPads to send home with the students. And that's what I mean about fully funding education, is making sure that our kids, that we're investing in our children so that they have the best opportunity at succeeding. And I mean, honestly, that's tied into the economy. Businesses and corporations don't want to come here to Arizona because we don't have an educated workforce to fill the jobs that they are supposed to be bringing here. But then, we have folks in the state legislature on the opposite side of the aisle who want to give corporate tax breaks to corporations. Meanwhile, working families are picking up the tab and paying more taxes. This is unacceptable. We need to do more. We need to do better. And priority is fully funding education. Education is a priority for me. And that is definitely something that I will fight for.
Well, a large portion of the state budget already goes to education. There's a big percentage of it.
And we still have gaps.
Appropriately, or what is the disparity there? If there's such a large portion of the state budget is going to education, and yet you're saying it's not appropriately funded, what would you change? What would happen?
Is that for me, Raquel?
Let's start with Linda on that one.
Okay. I have a different take on fully funded education. My take is fully funding education in the way I look at it is we look at pre-kindergarten through elementary, through junior high, through high school, into community college, and into college. Now, the way I look at that is right now, if we look at funding, what is happening right now is that billions of dollars every year are going to private schools, charter schools, scholarship accounts, and that takes right out of the education budget at the tune of about $5 billion a year that we lose. I think we need to look at revising our tax code, because right now, if you look at middle class Arizona and lower class Arizona, we are taxed to death. We pay sales tax, we pay property tax, we pay TPT tax, we pay taxes on our gas and our utilities and all that kind of stuff. We're corporate Arizona. The top 50 corporations in Arizona paid less than $50 in taxes last year. We just can't have that. Again, I look at, we've been dominated under one rule, pro-business, Republican legislators and a governor, and it's time that we started taking care of people. And one of the things we need to do is invest in education, because if we can revitalize pre-K through college education, the cost of college will go down miraculously, because what's happening is that money has been diverted too. So again, I'm looking for a comprehensive approach, pre-K, to college and revising the tax structure to do it.
Dr. Perez.
Yes, so I think it is important to recognize and compare to other states as well. I think if we just say numbers out there, they really don't mean anything unless you're really comparing with other states. And Arizona ranks towards the bottom compared to other states in terms of spending in education. Mm-hmm. But even so, public education is a top priority for people in Arizona. How do I know that? Because hardworking people are already paying a lot of money in taxes for education. As you mentioned, Raquel, the majority of Arizona's budget from the general fund goes to education. That's right. Taxpayers invested over $5 billion in education every year, which is billions more than what we invest in healthcare. That is a lot of money. But that's only half the story. Unfortunately, Arizona is not getting its return on its investment because a lot of the current representatives support and voted to divert a lot of that hard-earned money to fund education in other states. That's right. If somebody chooses to not send their children to public education in Arizona, they can receive a voucher for thousands of dollars to pay for education in another state. What's worse is that the current representatives currently support expanding this program, giving away your money with no financial oversight or accountability. That means people can use your tax dollars for beauty supplies, apparel, and even vacations. If you elect me, I will make sure that your money for education stays in Arizona.
Well, Linda, would you support an initiative that would increase the state income tax for education?
I like the Invest in Ed proposition. I think that it brings about a lot of promise for citizens in investing in education. It's really important that we take care of people. I think the money that's going to go into invest in education is going to take care of things like, I talked to some seniors in high school last year that had 50 kids in their class in a writing class. They didn't get individual attention for 2 weeks at a time. We just can't have that. We've got to invest in our ed. The same thing with pre-K programs. You know, little kids are like little amoebas that just want to learn as much as they can. Their brains just are going crazy. And I think it's really important that we do invest in early childhood education. I mean, there's so many decisions that need to be made in investing in education for our kids.
Joanna, should state income tax increase for education?
So, you know, I do support the Invest in Ed initiative because what it does is that it taxes the top 1% earners. So that burden isn't falling on working families. And that's extremely important because for decades, working families have been picking up the tab and have been taxed, as was mentioned previously, in a variety of different ways. I think we, in addition to that, we need to look at other sources of revenue. And modernizing our tax code. If we're not seeing a return on investment in some of these tax breaks that we're giving corporations, then we need to pull those back. So there's a lot of things that need to be done to ensure that we don't place that burden on working families.
We do have another question here from Keith. This came up, we're talking about public schools. Charter schools are public schools. I want to make sure we're clear on that. They want to know why charter schools are fully funded, but public schools are not. I want to make sure he's talking about district schools. Should that change in Arizona, the way the law reads for charter schools and how they are funded?
You know, I'd like to tackle that one because there's a lot of misinformation going on. Charter schools and public schools operate on a whole different set of systems. The standards for public schools and the standards for charter schools are different. Charter schools do not operate underneath the State Board of Education. They have their own mechanism of government where they can just pretty much take care of themselves. Public schools are accountable by the state standards. Those kids have to meet state standards. Charter schools meet charter school standards. And so there's a lot of misconception. And this year I have noticed that charter schools are calling themselves public charter schools. So whether or not you want to educate your kids with charter schools or public schools, it's really essential that you look at what your dollar is getting, because they are different systems, and education is really, really important. And I think it's due diligence on the part of parents to make sure that their kids are going to the educational places that are going to do them the best.
Dr. Perez, do you think the charter school system is good as is, or should there be changes?
I think there should be changes. I do remember overhearing two charter school teachers at one point last year, and one of the teachers asked the other one, "Can you really do that, or can we really do that?" And the other teacher replied as, "Yes, we can do anything we want because we're a charter school." So I think we do need to reform the oversight and accountability for charter schools. In addition, I think we also need to create equal access to higher education and aim for equity. One of the things with charter schools, it's great, parents love them sometimes, but what it creates is it leaves a gap in many other communities where both parents might be working, they're dependent on a school bus, they can't get their kids to the charter school or pick them up. So I think it is really important that we see public education for what it is. It is important because it helps people succeed. And these individuals, when they get a good education, become assets for a community, not a liability. And why should we care so much about public education? It's because a state's reputation is critical for a state's reputation for a good economy. As you know, good education attracts high-paying jobs, essential workers, decreases the tax dollars that we spend on incarceration, reduces the tax dollars spent on social services, and improves the local economy, empowers people to succeed, live healthier lives, effectively decreasing healthcare costs that we spend on. It increases everybody's property values, and it makes your community safer. The benefits of really creating a robust public education go on and on and on, and everybody benefits from it. So if I get elected, I will fully invest in the future of Arizona by investing in education.
Joanna, I'll give you this one. This is from Taryn. She said, if elected, how are you going to represent, protect, and educate on the Constitution of the United States?
Well, I mean, as someone who served in military uniform for 20 years and upheld the Constitution, protected our constitutional rights, obviously it's very important to me. But, I think that one way we can do that is ensuring that we fund our education system so that teachers actually have the resources available to them to teach our students about America's history and the Constitution. Now, in terms of representing people in the district, I plan to be a voice for everyone in this district, regardless of color, race, religious background, political affiliation. We have not seen that type of representation in our district for a lot of decades, actually. And what's happening in our communities right now with working class folks struggling, folks not having access to healthcare, that is a true reflection of the failed leadership that has been in power in this district for such a long time. And again, as I mentioned in my intro, I am a fighter. I fought my way out of poverty. I fought to protect our constitutional rights, and I'm going to fight for the people in this district.
Linda, do you think there is how would you gauge the understanding of the Constitution right now?
Okay. One of the things that I'm really concerned about and have been for at least 8 years is that the Constitution is what created our democracy. And, I love our democracy in that it gives power to the people. It is a framework for our whole political process. And if we do it correctly, it's the best hope of the world, in my opinion. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who don't understand the Constitution right now, or just completely ignore it. And our president is a good example of that. We've got state legislators who are also the same way. You know, the idea about having a Congress or a legislature made up of two houses is that they work together. Well, that hasn't happened in our state for a very long time. In fact, I have talked to legislatures this year who said to me they would bring a bill up to the House leadership, hand it to them, and it would go in a different hopper than the Republican bills. And the Republican bills are the ones that went to committee, which meant that they went to make laws. So these poor Democrats, not only were they not listened to because they wouldn't get recognized in the legislature by the leadership, but their bills never made it. That is just absolutely horrible for our democracy and our democratic ways.
Dr. Perez, you want to weigh in on that too?
Absolutely. The United States Constitution is absolutely necessary to protect our democracy. I think we need to make sure that this is something that we're teaching in our schools, public education. That is why it's so important that we can make sure that our young citizens are stewards of the Constitution and they learn about it. Second, we currently have state representatives that don't understand the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution was developed for the welfare being of our country and our republic. One particular part of it is that there's 3 branches of government. And that reason is so that no branch of government has too much power, like a dictator. And one of our current representatives thinks that the Supreme Court has no say in laws in the United States. And this is very concerning for me because you need those 3 powers balance to make sure that we have a country, that we have a government that represents the voice of the people. So when I get elected, I will support the U.S. Constitution and respect it. Thank you.
So, Joanna, where do you fall in the discussions about sanctuary cities? Should they be allowed in Arizona? And does that increase the vulnerability of people living here legally?
You know, the fact that we even have to ask that question is what's wrong with our society right now. You know, we have immigrants. My stepfather was an immigrant from Mexico who was naturalized under the amnesty program during the Reagan administration. He was a hardworking man. He worked in the fields. He paid his taxes. You know, he did his share to contribute to our communities. And we have a lot of immigrants, a lot of undocumented immigrants who are contributing to our economy, working in the agricultural industry right now, who are frontline workers who don't have the protections that they need, yet they continue to go to work every day so that we can have fresh fruits and vegetables. So the fact that we even have to ask that question is what's wrong with our society right now.
Dr. Perez, should there be sanctuary cities in Arizona?
Absolutely. So, you know, I think most people get lost in the weeds when they discuss this topic. I would argue the bigger question here is, why do we tolerate so much federal overreach over our states and cities? We know our communities better. Our law enforcement knows our community better, so they should be the ones policing it. What if federal and state law contradict each other? What do we do? I think we need to demand our politicians to work together to create real solutions and stop wasting everybody's time and money. We need to find real solutions that make our communities safer and remove dangerous criminals when necessary. So if I'm in office, I would definitely push back and try to limit federal overreach over our state.
Linda.
In handling this question, I want to say that I really believe it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the constituents think. I think one of the things that's wrong with our legislature right now is we're not representing our constituents' needs. Now, in terms of sanctuary cities, I did watch what happened in Tucson over the last year with the whole idea of sanctuary cities. And unfortunately, I think there was a whole educational component that wasn't initiated. People had different ideas about what a sanctuary city was. People were threatened because they didn't understand it. And I think that we come up with our best solutions if we have great awareness campaigns, if we can introduce the research, the data, and the best practices that we've learned from other places, And also, if we really listen to our constituents and educate our constituents. That's one thing that's sorely missing right now in our democracy is people, time is such an important ingredient in anything. And a lot of people don't have time. And a lot of people don't have time to listen to a Zoom meeting like we're doing tonight. They're busy after work taking care of their kids or other responsibilities they have. And unfortunately, that means that big decisions like sanctuary cities probably doesn't get the due diligence it needs. And so again, I would fall in line with whatever the constituents said. I think there's a local decision that needs to be made. I think that Trump got involved with it and shouldn't have, like Felipe has. And again, I think we go by what the people of the community desire for their city or town.
Dr. Perez, there is an initiative to legalize recreational marijuana that may make it to this year's ballot. What is your opinion of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we need to start a war on useless laws that are costing taxpayers millions of dollars every year that don't really fix anything. The reality is that most people with addictions have an underlying behavioral health disorder, or they're just using it at home innocently. Therefore, not only do we need to allow recreational marijuana, we need to tax it like Washington State has done. That generates around $400 million per year for them. That's money that we could pass on to education, treatment programs, and even help lower income taxes.
Okay. Have you ever used marijuana?
No.
Okay. Joanna, both the questions, but how do you feel about recreational marijuana?
How do I feel about the Smart and Safe initiative that would legalize marijuana? I think that it is responsible. That it is taxed, and that tax would go to funding programs in public education, which I fully support. Additionally, there's language in the initiative that would ensure that there's no marketing for or towards children, and also folks couldn't smoke it in public. So it is a smart and responsible way to introduce marijuana recreationally. And no, I have not smoked marijuana. I was actually very surprised to see that in your previous interview with the incumbent, Mr. Leach, that he was very proud of smoking marijuana while in military service, which the military currently has zero tolerance for drug use. So I found that to be very interesting, that he was very comfortable with saying that he smoked marijuana while serving in the military.
I don't know that he was proud, but it was a story from his past that he was telling. So might have been proud of the story. Okay, Linda, how do you feel about recreational marijuana?
I'm in complete support of legalizing it. I think the most dangerous drug we have that's used quite often is alcohol. So many people and so many social problems come from alcohol. Marijuana is chosen to be, for some people, medical marijuana is a great option for them. And so, why do we burden them with having to get all sorts of bureaucratic steps in order to obtain that medicine? I have never smoked marijuana. I was brought up in the 60s, and those were the days of reefer madness where they said it was laced with all kinds of things. And so I never have smoked it. I've been diagnosed to be able to get medical marijuana. I haven't done it yet, just because I haven't done it yet. So the concern I have with marijuana right now is that we've got to make sure that marijuana for teenagers is not something that we allow to happen, because certainly adolescents can get brain damage from the use of marijuana, and we've got to be able to take care of our adolescents and not let them get waylaid by the whole process of what marijuana does.
That was just one of the issues that might be coming onto the ballot. Do each of you have a favorite issue that is coming forward that you would support that is coming onto the November ballot?
Yeah, invest in ed.
Invest in ed as well.
I'd have to say the same thing. My passion is education. I believe in it very strongly. I think it's the great equalizer in a society, and there's a lot we can do that's positive with education.
Do you feel like the state and local governments have responded appropriately to the Black Lives Matter protests? Dr. Perez.
Sure. I'm really disappointed at Arizona's response to just social and racial injustice in general. It's been more than 200 years since America declared its independence and freedom. And although progress has been made towards social and racial justice by great leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, we still don't have a nation that grants equal rights or opportunities for all individuals, including women. To fundamentally address this issue, I think we need to start with the fundamentals and remove disparities in education, healthcare, and the justice system. We can start by fully funding education to ensure that all kids, regardless of background, are successful. 2, we need to ensure that everybody has equal access to affordable healthcare. 3, we need to make sure that we have law enforcement reform and bring awareness to this and demand that the reform addresses social and racial injustice. And lastly, we need to ratify Equal Rights Act and make it a permanent part of the United States Constitution. Without these, we're going to continue having these. It is disappointing that our state is at this stage, including when SB 270 came out. We need to change our state government, the way we look at things, the way we look at equal rights, and act on it and progress forward as a state and nation.
Joanna, did
Yeah.
you feel like the state,
So
about the way the state and local governments responded to Black Lives Matter protests?
I think that it is very interesting that we have elected officials in this district who refuse to talk about race and systemic racism. As a matter of fact, I think that the conversation in your interview was that they were tired of talking about race. They were tired. Well, I'm tired that our sons and our daughters are being beaten and killed at the hands of law enforcement officials who have taken an oath to protect and serve our communities. I'm tired that folks, working families, are struggling to feed their kids and pay the first month's rent. I'm tired that folks who need access to healthcare don't have access to healthcare. I'm tired that we're not investing in our children. And frankly, I'm tired that we have elected officials in this district who don't care enough about the people that they have been elected to serve to do something. So to answer the question, I am disappointed and I am tired. And that's why I jumped into this political fight, because we need elected representation who is going to be a voice for people, who is going to listen, to understand, who is going to address the needs of our communities. And that's what I'm going to fight for.
Linda.
When I was young and became a political advocate, it was based on what Martin Luther King Jr. was doing. He inspired me. He made me realize that things could be better for all people. And I've carried that throughout my life. I too am very disappointed that the Black Lives Matter initiative seems to be being ignored in our state. We've got huge problems in Phoenix, for example, with police brutality. And the fact that nothing substantial is coming out of what Black Lives Matter is standing for is unconscionable to me. What Black Lives Matter, it's all about human dignity, providing a clear vision for justice and equality, and requires all of us to stand up, pay attention, and work toward equality for people. I do like the fact that the Black Lives Matter initiative is asking for 6 concrete steps that, we could all follow and we could do it right now. They want a commission to study about reparations and what that means and what can be done. They want to divest in for-profit prisons. I think all of us can agree on that. They want to see the militarization of police eliminated. I think all of us can support that. They want economic, social, and political justice. That's only fair. It's past time. The sins of our history need to be taken care of now. They want community control of laws and institutions and policies that impact everybody. And they want to have some self-determination in their communities and political power in the communities. Those are all things I think we can all work for because it's what all of us want. Again, I'm disappointed. I think we need new leadership in the legislature. And I think that, you know, I think Felipe and Joanna and I are on the same path in wanting to make sure that we take care of people. And I'm just so very, very disappointed in Arizona for not joining the bandwagon.
Did any of you participate physically in any BLM protests? Linda? Okay. Melinda, you brought up earlier when you were talking about, you said that we have an old economy. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, you know, I remember when I moved into the state in education, and one of the classes I had to take in order to get my certification in Arizona was I had to take an Arizona history class. And basically it said that the Arizona economy is based on 4 things: copper, citrus, oh boy, now I'm not gonna be able to remember all of them. They were all C's, cattle, and okay, I've lost the 4th. Anyway, cotton, that was the 4th one. I kind of look at that and I think, you know, we're still stuck in that economy. And the rest of the world and the rest of our country has grown into the technological age. As Joanna brought up, we have schools that don't have computers. We have people in our district that don't have any access to online learning. You know, we need to reframe what we're doing in Arizona. So here's one concrete example that I thought of, Raquel, and that is we've got a climate crisis. And people in Arizona are behind tackling the climate crisis. Well, okay, let's do that. Let's reduce our carbon footprint, and let's recover money from tax reforms, and let's put people to work by rebuilding our infrastructure. And within that, let's go for solar power and wind power and water power. Because right now, fossil fuels is what fuels our economy. And that's an old paradigm. We've got to switch and come into the future. And by climate change, we can do that. So that's just one example.
Okay. Joanna, you're her primary opponent. How do you feel about what she's just said?
I'm sorry, what was the question again, about old government or?
The old economy that she was talking about, the 4 C's or the 5 C's now of the Arizona economy that it's based on. Do you agree with her stand on that?
Well, you know, I think that it is time that we move Arizona forward and start thinking about clean energy and how we can, you know, be part of that conversation. I don't know why, with Arizona having over 300 plus days of sunshine, why we're not leading in this area of solar and wind. So I think that there is a lot of room for improvement, but also that begins with ensuring that we have the representation at the state capitol who's willing to move Arizona forward in that direction. And right now we currently don't have that. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of work to be done. And we have to get the right people in place to be able to push that agenda for a vision that puts Arizona #1 in, you know, clean energy jobs, #1 in education, #1 in healthcare, and not #1 in the most for most cases for COVID.
Right. Dr. Perez, we have kind of a related question here. Looking back on the economy, how can we pressure the governor to regulate large farm groundwater pumping? That's a question from Elsie.
Absolutely. You know, I think this is we need to base that decision on data, but we also have to involve our state legislatures and our governor. I think we do need to look at the data and say, be conservative with our water, making sure that we are planning for the future. So it's really driven by data, making sure that we're planning for those droughts that we do have in Arizona. As you know, our aquifer is depleting over time. Lake Mead is depleting as well. So I think it really is important that we are good stewards of our surface and groundwater. And then just going back to the other question as well, is that we need to make sure that we're not dependent on just one of those four main drivers of our economy. Because if we were to have a shortage of water, taking out 25% of our economy would be very dangerous for Arizona. So I think we need to add more. We need to have 5, 6, 7, 10 different economy drivers to make sure that our state is sustainable.
Joanna, to you.
So, there have been big agricultural companies from outside of the United States who have been coming here for years to raise or grow alfalfa and then send it back to their countries. And they have the money to invest in these huge drills that pump straight into our groundwater and pull all that groundwater out. And that needs to stop. We need to ensure that we put measures in place that would prevent folks from outside of Arizona coming in to Arizona and using up our groundwater. This is unacceptable. Additionally, I think that there was some bipartisan support for bills at the state legislature that would capture how much water we actually had on metering. Doesn't appear that those bills went anywhere, but we need to capture how much water we actually have. We don't know that. And without knowing that, we can't implement or put things in place that would ensure that we have water for future years to come. We know that this is a huge issue in Arizona. So moving forward, we need to ensure that we address how much water, we figure out how much water we have by allowing some of this metering to be done. And then we don't allow these foreign big agricultural companies to come in here and suck up all our groundwater.
Here in Maricopa and elsewhere in the state, we've had city council members that are kind of complaining about the way transaction privilege tax is handled, where they're getting having to pay at different levels for the same thing. Is there anything that you would do that would change that? Linda.
I'm really concerned about the TPT tax because it chooses winners and losers. And the losers, believe it or not, guess who it is? It's middle class, and it's everyday Arizonans who are getting taxed to death. I've got a list here of what is taxed under the TPT tax, and if you look, it's services we use, transporting things. So so if we order something and it has to come here on a truck, we're going to get taxed with a TPT tax. Utilities have a TPT tax. Telecommunications, our phones, our internet, all that has a tax on top. It's not a sales tax, it's a tax on top of all of that. Publications, if you order newspapers or online newspapers or magazines, that's taxed. Printing costs are taxed. If something comes through on a pipeline, it's taxed. Again, if you look at all this, it's winners and losers. And the state legislature should have taken this on a long time ago. The TPT tax came about in the Great Depression when they needed to look for more tax revenue because there wasn't property tax. Property values went down. So we're looking at a 90-year-old system. And what's happening is, as corporate Arizona has not wanted to pay their fair share, the legislature, Republican dominated, has looked at ways that they can garner extra taxes. And what I maintain is that's why we need tax reform. That's why we need to come up with everybody pays their fair share. And we need to really look for a fair tax system because right now, everyday Arizonans are getting taxed to death.
Joanna, do you feel the same, number one, about how she brought up this TPT is basically a sales tax, about how that is used, but also how cities are held accountable on various levels? I feel like they're having to double dip and double pay for the service.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. We definitely need to modernize our tax code. And I think that, especially across the board, Democrats across the board want folks to pay their fair share of taxes, corporations to pay their fair share of taxes. So I think really the answer is, this is just not a one person can fix this issue answer. But this requires ensuring that we have a state legislature that will seek to modernize our tax code and ensure that everyone is paying their fair share. So yes, I mean, I agree with those points, and we need to take a look at who's paying what, and we need to modernize our tax code. That's the bottom line.
Dr. Perez, I'm going to switch it up for you. We have some questions coming in here. We're going to talk about healthcare, but one of the first questions that came in from Paul was, where do you stand on abortion rights?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think this is a decision between a woman, a patient, and her physician. I don't think anybody should have to be in that room with them, making that decision for them. It's a very private decision, and it should be between the patient and their physician.
Do you think a definition of when life begins should be codified?
I don't know what that means.
Put into law? Should they define when life begins?
I think it is a very well-intended point, but in reality, who would be able to determine that?
Exactly. Joanna, how do you feel about abortion?
Yeah, it is a very personal, private decision between a person, that person's provider, and the individuals that person chooses to be involved in that decision. This is not something that we want politicians legislating on. This is a personal, private decision. Again, like Dr. Perez said, between a patient, their physician, and whomever else that they feel is appropriate to have as part of that conversation.
Okay, Linda?
I was a young adult, a high school student, young adult, when the whole issue, I had friends who had abortions, and it was a horrible situation because they got all sorts of infections, and there's just no really good solution to that debate in terms of life consequences and what it does to a person's psyche, in addition to the other type of health that they have. I'm a supporter of abortion because I've seen too many horrible situations happen among friends of mine. I look at myself. My sister was 9 months older than me, which means that was timed pretty closely. But my mom had to make a decision that was best for her and for her family. And I don't look back on that. I think it's really important that we do allow people to make decisions for themselves.
And Joanna, we were speaking of healthcare. What do you think is Arizona's biggest challenge in healthcare, and what would you do to fix it?
Well, I mean, during COVID or pre-COVID, or because right now the COVID situation has changed everything, right? And so what currently stood before in terms of how we were looking at healthcare and the things that needed to be addressed are now just exacerbated by the pandemic. And I think that healthcare is a human right, and folks need to have access to healthcare. I myself grew up on access. I mean, without that, I don't know if I would be in front of you today, and there's a lot of folks still in the district today, throughout Arizona actually, who depend on that healthcare insurance to be able to make it through. I don't think that it's right that we have folks in the state legislature who are trying to pull away healthcare during a pandemic. I think it's wrong that we're trying to remove healthcare from folks who have pre-existing conditions. This is insane. This is just inhumane. So, to answer that question, I mean, healthcare in general, period, is an issue itself, and folks need to have access to it, especially right now during a pandemic.
Linda, what is the biggest issue you see with healthcare in Arizona, and what is your fix?
Okay. I think healthcare is a human right. And right now in Arizona, that human right is not available equally to people. We need to have accessible and affordable healthcare. Senator Leach, our opponent, my opponent in the general election, just passed a bill that was really kind of sneaky because it allowed insurance companies, it provided that insurance companies would provide healthcare for pre-existing conditions. So it looks good. He can say, I voted, I got this introduced. But the flip side of it is they can charge anything they want for that coverage. And so really it wasn't a win for the people. And so it's that kind of gimmicky stuff that I think people are fed up with. And I'm fed up with it. I know that I pay an exorbitant amount of money every month for my health care. And I'm on a fixed income. As are a lot of people in LD11. There are a lot of poor people that aren't in the mix. If they take away affordable health care, our district will be in really, really a bad situation. So we need to be visionary with healthcare. We need to make sure that we take care of everybody and make sure there aren't any gaps. Because again, healthcare is a human right, in my opinion.
And Dr. Philippe, this is your wheelhouse.
Absolutely. So, this is a difficult question because I see things as a provider or a medical worker, and I also see it as a normal citizen. I think there's a lot of issues with it from a healthcare perspective, but I think my biggest priority would be from a patient's perspective. We absolutely need affordable, accessible healthcare. And the thing that we really need to fix is that if somebody ends up with a serious illness or a loved one ends up with a serious illness, nobody should go bankrupt. Nobody should lose their house because of the medical bills. It is not uncommon for somebody to have a major event and come out of the hospital with a $100,000 bill. $100,000. 10 years ago, I had a friend who was a physician who had a ruptured aneurysm, and she needed to be in the hospital, have brain surgery. And she had medical insurance. When she came out, she owed over $100,000. And she was like, how am I ever going to pay this back? So I think that is the number one thing, is that we need to protect everybody, working families, individuals, people on fixed incomes, to make sure that they're not surprised by a huge bill and that they don't go bankrupt because of that bill.
Linda and Joanna, you guys are opponents in this Senate primary. What is the biggest difference between the two? How are voters expected to choose between the two of you? Joanna.
That's a great question that we get asked all the time, actually. Well, I think what's really important to capture is experience and knowledge, and service. I spent my entire life serving. I served this country in military uniform for 20 years, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. After I retired, I came back to serve doing volunteer work. I currently serve as a school board member. I've had the honor and privilege of serving our communities in this congressional district as a congressional staffer. And service, what we need right now is servant leadership. We need individuals, elected leaders who understand the struggles of working class folks, who are going to fight to ensure that our community's needs are met. And I have a working knowledge of the issues that are impacting our district because I did work in federal government here in the district in our communities, helping our constituents. And additionally, I have proven leadership. I've led men and women forward deployed to a combat environment, a crisis management environment, if you will, crisis situation. And that this pandemic calls for proven leadership who can lead during a time of crisis, who have experience in balancing the mission for success, which is getting through this pandemic, right? And ensuring that we mitigate the risk and keeping our folks as safe as we possibly can. So, the experience is absolutely essential, but also the knowledge of working in this district and understanding the issues that working class families are facing every day.
Linda.
Well, it's interesting to hear that because I study the demographics of the district prior to even listening to residents. But then after studying the demographics and understanding that there's a whole lot of difference in our district, because it's, we've got Maricopa and we've got Saddlebrook and we've got Red Rock and it's just so diverse. And so it was really important that I had my ear to the ground listening to constituents' concerns. And so for the entire campaign, I've had 6 major issues: healthcare, education, human rights, climate change, the economy, water. And I've got to say, Joanna didn't have those for 90% of her campaign. And so when you talk about leadership, I have worked with people all of my life in civil service. I have had to come to the table with diverse perspectives and compromise and negotiate and see that everybody has a voice at the table, and we've got to come up with a workable solution. I've done that all my life. That's what we need in the legislature right now. We're coming from a very, very divided and polarized legislative process. It requires people who can work for win-win solutions, who are creative in reinventing systems. It's not like that I have inherited systems that have worked for people all the time. I never did that. But I worked my heart out listening to people and coming up with better transformational change. And that's what we need in the legislature right now. I've been behind our district on issues the entire time I've run. I have the experience that matters, because it's very transferable right into the legislature. And I will work my heart out for you. I have done that all my life. I have worked for people my entire life. And I want to work for people even more. And I feel like I have a really good voice to go into the legislature. So that's the difference between my opponent and I.
And we talked about diversity and the voter especially in Maricopa itself. There are a lot of Democrats, but not nearly as many as there are Republicans and right-leaning independents. How do you appeal to those voters if you are to go forward to the general election? Joanna.
So I think it's really important to understand that, we've seen an increase in voter registration in the district over the last couple of months. I think it's increased by over 10,000 in the district as a whole. That really tells me that people are listening, they're paying attention, they're seeing our elected officials for who they really truly are, and they want change. I think what's very unique about me and my candidacy is that I was born and raised in our communities right here in this district. I understand what it's like to live and grow up in a rural community. I live in a rural community right now in Red Rock. And additionally, I have already done the work in our communities to gather support. And what does that look like? That looks like connecting with organizations and folks throughout the district who will support me in my candidacy. But we also have to capture that I do have a lifetime for me, half my life of military service and serving this country. And that says something. That says that I have sacrificed for this nation, that I am committed to serving this country. And I think that that will appeal to the voters in this district, who we have a high number of veterans and folks who have served in the military here, military families as well that put down roots here. So my appeal is that I have something for everyone. I am a veteran. I grew up in these rural communities. I'm a mom. I'm a working mom. I understand the struggle of working class folks. I'm very diverse, and I believe that folks will resonate with that.
Linda.
I don't take one vote for granted, and I am of the philosophy that everybody out there can join the effort. I have Republicans who have told me, because I'm a public educator, that makes a difference to them, because 95% of the people in our district believe in public education. If you look at the independents and the Democrats, that makes up almost 2/3 of our district. And so what that means is, if I have been recruiting independents as well as Republicans and Democrats, because again, I think the solution is all of us coming together. We can't just say, I'm a Democrat and I'm just going to fight for this. I am a Democrat, but I'm going to listen to the people of our district, because that's what democracy is all about. And so I believe the winning coalition is made up of all three groups, because hopefully then we can all come together in Legislative District 11 to really do the work of the people. And so that's my equation. Again, if you look at it mathematically, between the independents and the Democrats, we could do it by ourselves, but I think we've got to bring everybody into the tent, because that's what I believe good government does.
Dr. Perez, we kind of left you out of things for a little bit there. You automatically go forward. You don't have an opposition in this particular race. If you were to be elected, how would you get up to speed on the big issues of the state?
Absolutely. So, I've been serving patients in Arizona for a little bit over 2.5 decades. First as a volunteer, then as a medical student, and now as a family medicine physician. And in that time, I've met thousands of patients. And in all those years, I found that the single most important skill that I developed to help people and get well is to listen. But listen with the intention to understand what their needs are. And it is that critical skill that has really helped me help patients and partner with them to get them well. Unfortunately, I think our District 11 representatives don't listen or understand. I've heard countless people say that they've tried to speak with our current representatives only to have their concerns dismissed. Oftentimes, I've heard this from Republicans and Democrats. It only illustrates why our current pandemic is at the level it is, because our current representatives have not listened. They've not listened to the issues. They've not learned what the correct data is, and they've remained willful and ignorant about the facts. So if I get elected as a physician, as a professional, as a father, I will quickly pick up the issues, start gathering data, listen to experts, and really make the best decision for District 11. That is what every representative should do. They should be open to hearing people's point of view, speaking with experts, and getting things done for Arizona and making Arizona strong.
And staying with Felipe, what issue do you know already that you don't have enough information on to make decisions about, that you would need to study up on?
Absolutely. So, I think water is as good as gold in Arizona. I think it is a very complex system. I know there's a lot of water rights, and there's a lot of differences between surface water, groundwater. We have to be very careful in terms of regulating that, because it could inadvertently or intentionally hurt a lot of people that are dependent on water. So I think water is one thing that we definitely need to learn about more, myself, but then also at the state government, making sure that we plan for the future and that we can guarantee that we will have water in our state during a prolonged drought. And
Joanna and Linda too, what do you already know to be your weak spot as far as knowledge of issues that you feel like you really need to catch up with?
Yeah, so, in the Marine Corps, we don't say weak spots, we say shortcomings. But I have to agree with Dr. Perez, is that it's water. Water is an extremely complicated issue. The chairman of my campaign he's a water guru. And every time I ask him, okay, here's this issue with water, let's talk about it. And he's like, here's all you need to know. No water bad. That's it. And, but that just goes to show that it is an extremely complicated issue. And that is something that I think that that I definitely need to learn more about. But because there's just so much going on with it, right? So I would have to say, yeah, water as well.
Okay, Linda?
For me, it's the fiscal responsibilities that the legislature has. I'm really interested in the House Ways and Means Committee just because I don't know that much about it. And what I mean by interested is I just can't wait to learn more about it because, you know, government functions for all people. And the duty of government is to bring all of our common resources together to where we can provide better services for people. And so I really want to get into that financial aspect to really understand where the money's going, where it's coming from, where it's being wasted, all of that that is so important. Every dollar matters to Arizonans. And we're in the period of tax giveaways to one segment of the population that got all sorts of windfalls from the Trump tax reforms, followed by what's happening in the legislature and has for decades and decades. I want to know more about that so we know how to make sure that government works for all people.
And to wrap things up, we have a two-part question basically, because most of our readers and viewers are Maricopans. It's a unique city over here. Number one, how many times have you been to Maricopa? And number two, why should Maricopans vote for you? So I'll start with Felipe.
Sure, absolutely. I've been to Maricopa several times. Last time I was there was right before the pandemic at the Salsa Festival. It's a beautiful community. And it actually reminded me a lot about my growing up in Yuma, Arizona, which is very rural, but it's kind of close to Phoenix. What I would ask Maricopans is to please vote for me in November. Your vote is your voice that we need new leadership in Arizona. A vote for me is a vote for an experienced, independent thinking physician that will listen and understand your needs. I will fight to bring real solutions to fix education and healthcare in our state. And I think my life experiences make me the best candidate to represent you, and I will work with both Democrats and Republicans to fight for a strong Arizona. And how can you help? It's easy. Vote for just one, Dr. Felipe Perez for State House, and let's put a doctor in the House.
Okay. Joanna.
Yes, so the last time I was in Maricopa was probably a couple of weeks ago, dropping off signs there. Actually, probably 2 weeks ago, dropping off signs for folks who wanted signs in Maricopa. But then again, I worked throughout this congressional district as a congressional staffer. So I was always in and out of Maricopa throughout the district, putting a lot of miles on my Jeep that probably shouldn't be there, but definitely well worth it. And voters should vote for me because it's time that we had elected leadership who understand the struggles that they're facing every day. Someone who is from our communities, someone who was born and raised here, who understands what it's like to have to balance work, paying bills, raising your kids. And because I will ensure that everyone in this district has a voice. I firmly believe that folks need to have access to their legislators. I'll ensure that everyone has a voice and access to me, because currently right now we're not seeing that. We need to ensure that we have elected leadership who has proven leadership and experience, especially during this pandemic. I will ensure that the community's needs, that I'll fight for those community needs. And lastly, because it's time for change in this district. People are awake now. They're seeing our elected leadership for who they really are. And I think they want change, and that change begins with me. So for more information, please feel free to visit my website at www.mendoza4arizona.com. If you're still unsure on who to vote for, I encourage all folks to visit the Clean Elections Candidate Compass. We all had to fill that out, or those that participated filled it out. You can answer a few questions and it'll align you with the candidate that best aligns with your values. So please check us out. Thank you.
Linda, how often have you been to Maricopa, and why should Maricopans vote for you?
Okay, thank you. Over the course of this campaign season, I've probably averaged once a month, and that's not near enough. And I realize that. It's a real shortcoming. It doesn't mean that I'm not knowledgeable about what's going on in Maricopa, because again, one of the things I learned in my educational career was you have to look at issues in depth And I have done that with Maricopa. I know what the demographics are. I've been there enough to listen in Democratic meetings, attended affairs up there to where they haven't been just quick visits through that don't have any depth to them. It's a priority for me once I win the primary to get up there more often, because there are a lot of constituencies in there that I need to meet with, and I will do better. I think that Maricopa is at a neat juncture right now, because it's moving from, you know, it was known for so long as being a rural community. And now it is a you know, kind of a bedroom community of Phoenix. And so it's bringing all different diversity, all different types of people into Maricopa. It's growing, and we're finding that it's outgrowing the existing road system. There aren't enough houses. There's not enough places to rent. There are a lot of things that are going on right now that someone needs to really make sure that they know what they're doing in Maricopa. And I promise that I will make sure I do that. Maricopa is important, as are all the other places in the district. But the one thing I can promise you is I will work my heart out, because I've done that all my life. And I will listen to people. If you've got any questions for me, my phone number is 520-250-2855. I put that out online all the time, and I have people calling me all the time. So feel free to call me and talk to me. I'm also on Facebook. I also have a website. You can contact me in any way you want in order to make me more informed about what I can do for you. That's the kind of legislator I want to be. It's not like you're going to hear from me only in election season. I'm making a pledge to make sure that I'm in the communities I represent throughout my tenure as a legislator. I ask you for a vote. I think I'm very, very informed. I think I know how to get things done. I don't fight for people. I work for people, and there's a difference. I'd like to, you know, that's not minimizing what Joanna does. You know, my dad's a veteran. All of my uncles are veterans. My grandfathers were veterans. I just have a different philosophy. I don't fight for people. I work for people, and I've done so all my life. Thank you very much for listening to us. I would really feel wonderful if you could give me your vote.
Okay, I appreciate all three of you joining us today. It was, I think, a fruitful conversation. I'd like to thank Linda Peterson, Joanna Mendoza, and Dr. Felipe Perez. They're the Democratic candidates for Legislative District 11. Thanks so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Safe.